Good afternoon, everybody. It's Midtown Mando here. First of all, I want to apologize for not doing a stream last night. The internet service provider I use was having some kind of glitches going on with their system, and honestly, I did not feel it was a good idea to even attempt to start a stream while that was still unresolved. Now, from everything I've been able to determine, that has been fixed. So I decided to try to make up a little bit for last night to go ahead and get on, do a little bit of a chill stream, chit chat, and do a little bit of the hobby work that I am kind of known for a little bit in the background. So I am going to go ahead and do something I normally don't do and post a link to this particular stream into the chat. So if anyone wishes to join in, all I ask is you have a good YouTube-friendly audio avatar and decent microphone. You don't have to be on camera yourself. So today, what I'm working on is a set of cavalry for the relatively recently re-released army for Warhammer Age of Sigmar called the Cities of Sigmar. Now, the Age of Sigmar setting is kind of your stereotypical fantasy setting. A lot of stuff that can't really exist with real-world science. You got things like orcs, goblins, various other weird fantasy creatures running around. You also have the undead, and occasionally things that really don't fit any other descriptor that I've ever seen used on a regular basis. And today, what I'm working on is a group of what are essentially cavalry, a hybrid of cavalry knights and old school pistoliers from back in the days of the conquistadors that are set in this particular world. Now, the Age of Sigmar setting has some really interesting quirks that you don't find in a lot of other fantasy settings. In some ways, it's more akin to early Magic the Gathering than it is to what we're familiar with from Lord of the Rings or many of the other sword and sorcery type channels or stories that are out there. Although the company, or being that the company that produces this likes to borrow inspiration quite heavily from multiple sources, there's really no telling where some of the stuff that they use in this came from, because there are elements that are definitely Conan-esque and some elements that are more akin to, well, Lord of the Rings, or lack of better descriptors. I'm not a huge fantasy fan, so I don't necessarily know a lot about a bunch of these different settings or a lot of the different fantasy groups that are out there. But this particular one, it's interesting in regards to the fact that there is not just one particular overarching theme to the world. It's not one of these things where, oh yes, you could go into there, and if you're familiar with the 1600s Europe, you'll fit right in. It's not something that is akin to Conan the Barbarian, where it's Stone Age. There are dwarves in this setting that actually use airships and blimps. There are creatures in this setting that are literally made out of multiple recycled other creatures. But today what I'm focusing on are just your plain old normal human beings on horseback. If anyone actually does join in, maybe I'll give an explanation as to exactly what the setting has to offer, because there is a whole lot that goes into Age of Sigmar that I'm not even coming close to touching on. Because, like I said, I'm not really a big fantasy fan. I am more of a hard sci-fi or science fantasy type fan than I am necessarily a fantasy Lord of the Rings-esque type fan. But what I'm doing with this right now is I'm starting out by going through, and first of all, I retouched certain areas of the base coat / primer that did not take as well as I really wanted them to. And because this apartment is very dark, I ended up having to go through and back check a lot of stuff. Also, I do something that a lot of other hobbyists in the Warhammer community don't do. I paint on the sprue, because that allows me to get details that otherwise would not be reachable when the model is complete, and it allows me to get a more full and, well, it just allows me to get the thing where it will look more correct, in my opinion. Now, there's a lot of Warhammer players out there who see this and are like, oh, that's the worst way you can do this. What about the mold lines? There's a lot of players out there who they just really, really dislike my technique. I'm not going to go into all the reasons why, because honestly, they're silly. And if you are comfortable painting on the sprue, paint on the sprue. If you're comfortable painting after fully assemble, then paint. It's all on you, what you think is the best way to do it, and how you actually work it. My painting technique is a modified layering, which is essentially, I hybridize layering and dry brushing for these models. Normally, I let the brush go until it is a lot drier than a lot of other hobbyists will, and and drier than a lot of painters recommend you doing. But that allows for it to actually start giving you a little bit more depth, in my opinion, on the paint job. Not every model needs to look like it's fresh from the factory. In fact, there's a few of the models I've done over the years that they actually look better, in my opinion, when they look like they've been beaten halfway to Hades and back again. And maybe one of these days I will be going through and doing up a Titan model on screen, going from where it's primed to where it's almost, if not 100% completed. By the way, I do not expect that this entire set is going to be done by the time I end the stream. At most, you're going to see probably 80% completion, because this, going from where they're at currently to completion, takes a lot more than 2 hours. And I'll be honest, if no one decides to jump in and chit-chat, I will probably end up killing the stream here, because no one just wants to sit and watch paint dry and listen to some rando blather on the internet about some silly nonsense. So, according to what StreamYards is showing, I've got one viewer already in there. If there actually is someone there, could you please put a 1 in the chat so I actually know that it is reading an individual person and not just showing my camera as somebody who is viewing. Well, continuing on, this particular army that I'm working on is from a part of the Warhammer world known as the Realm of Shyish, or the Realm of Death. Essentially, in the mortal realms of Warhammer 40k, there's 9 worlds, for lack of better description, that you need to go through these things that are very similar to stargates from modern sci-fi to get from one world to another. You can literally travel from a world where people are living side by side with elves and living trees to a world where the mountain range is literally trying to eat you. And to do that, you have to go through these things called realm gates. There used to be, in the setting, or at least according to the storyline of the setting, a place where you could go that you could access all of the different realms with relative ease. But that particular location has been very, very corrupted over, I have absolutely no idea how much time, because they're super ambiguous about that. And it's led to that particular realm being seen as essentially an extension of Chaos. Which, in Age of Sigmar, Chaos is kind of a bad thing to deal with because of this kind of stuff that they cause to be done to people. But at the same time, they're not technically evil. If you remember the stream I did a few months ago with Outlaw, Tommy D, and a couple others talking about Warhammer 40k, the exact same 4 Chaos deities from Warhammer 40k are in Age of Sigmar. Now, whether or not Age of Sigmar is a parallel dimension to 40k, I don't know. I don't think anybody, except maybe the people who write the setting, have an idea about that. But it is what it is. It does have some really interesting stories, and it has some stories that leave you going, what kind of crazed psychopath would write this? And I'm just looking to see if there's any chats in the public or private side, and I'm not seeing any. Now, again, I want to apologize to everyone who normally would have tuned in last night at 7 Central. My internet service provider has been having some kind of glitch going on where they are not, or where their system is not pushing out as much internet connectivity as it's supposed to. It looks right now as though that has been corrected, because I'm streaming without much of an issue. But that could easily change. And it could also easily be the fact that I literally only have the computer on and pulling anything from the internet. I've even got my phone on airplane mode at the moment because, honestly, if it were to kick on, I'm afraid it would kick me off of my own stream, like it did with me on Rhino on Friday. Well, I have got most of the chainmail elements of this particular unit hit with their undercoat. And the next step is going to be me moving on to doing the base coat for the horse's fur on the areas that is visible. Now, normally, this is one of those things where I would break my rule about painting on sprue, and I would do at least partial assembly of the horses. However, with the way they designed these particular sprues, they are highly modular, where two modelers theoretically would have the exact same arrangements for their horsemen whatsoever. What that also means is, with the techniques that I use, I can't really get a good baseline for how they are going to look when fully assembled. So there's not going to be a huge amount of variety on the horses themselves. They're just going to be done up in this kind of grayish black color with a red-brown color on their hooves. I might apply a little bit of a black metal to indicate that they've been shot in a way that could be weaponized. But that's a decision I will make when I'm closer to the finish point of these models. Also, as an apology in advance, my little cat Evie has been sick of late, and she's in my lap currently, but she has been a little growly today. So if you start hearing hissing, growling, yowling, basically angry kitty noises, don't be alarmed. That's just Evie getting upset that I'm moving around and she doesn't want what's currently her bed to move. Because my little cat is currently trying to nap on my lap. So, in the comments, if there's any suggestions you guys have on the color pattern for this, or if there's any particular type of models you would like to see me do on future streams of this nature, go ahead and drop it in there. I might see if it's something that I'm interested in. I might do something like that in the future. I'm always looking for a new challenge when it comes to my hobby, because I've done Warhammer 40k Space Marines ad nauseum for a long time. I could almost do a lot of them in my sleep, similar with some of their transport vehicles. One of them in particular, another content creator that I join on his stream on a regular basis, would probably be annoyed with the name of. But that's going to be, I'm probably going to save that for over the Christmas break to do an evening version of this. This is one of the things that annoys me about the way these sprues were designed. If you look, you probably really can't tell on the screen, but there's a gap there that on certain other cavalry models, that would definitely be where the blanket for the horse would be going, or the cloth underneath the steel plating would be, to keep the plate from getting in direct contact with the horse itself. The way this model is designed and the way it's molded, it's ambiguous if that's musculature or if that's wrinkling from the cloth. I'm going to assume that it's wrinkling from the cloth, just because that'll give me an excuse to do a different color in there than I normally would. Because this army is going to be very, very dark once it's fully painted. And I don't mean dark in theme, although being from the realm of death, that is kind of a dark theme. I mean dark in color. This dude right over here is the general for this army. I'm having to retouch the cloak on him because I didn't realize that parts of it had worn off when I glued it together. And once I did realize that, I was like, well, shoot. Now I can't not see it after I noticed it, so I need to go and fix that. Yeah, you might notice also I'm not thinning down my paints. There's a lot of people who swear up and down that the best way to do these things is that you thin down your paints and do them in multiple watery coats instead of one thicker coat. That's a technique. I'm not going to say it's a bad technique. It's a technique I don't have the patience for. I have ruined too many paints and too many brushes by doing that over the years. So I just accept the loss of, or some minor loss of detail, and go ahead and do the full thing. Okay, Gendai 451, I was about to let you in, but you dropped off all of a sudden. I don't know if that was a mistake or what. You want to jump in, or try jumping in again? Feel free to. Alright, back to what I was mentioning. The horses I'm doing up in this really kind of dark gray, almost black color, because, like I said, they're from a realm that is essentially the embodiment of afterlives from multiple realms of existence. Any of you who might remember the original Magic the Gathering setting might know that the original setting didn't have all these alternate universes or planes that people were going to. Yeah, they had a few, but generally speaking, it was one world with various regions that the different elements in the game were embodiments of those regions. In Age of Sigmar, there is something kind of similar, where there are 8 realms that mortal life forms can survive in without huge amounts of effort, but they're not necessarily what humans would consider to be habitable realms. And even though it's considered one of the mortal realms, in air quotes, the realm of death is where all souls would end up going to after their time in their mortal coil came to an end. So if you were an orc in this setting, there would be an underworld for your kind. Elves, in theory, would have something similar. Humans, because of the various spiritual and religious beliefs that humans have in real life and in the Age of Sigmar setting, have multiple different underworlds that they could potentially go to. So theoretically, there would be one that is equivalent to the Valhalla of Norse mythology, one equivalent to the Hades of Greek mythology, and one equivalent to pretty much any kind of religious belief that you could imagine. If there was an individual who was part of a cult that basically said if you were a hard worker, you would be rewarded in the afterlife. In this setting, it used to be one of these things where you would, or when you finally passed on, you would go to that particular afterlife and get whatever your eternal reward or punishment would be. Well, at some point in the history of the mortal realms, a entity, essentially a god from the previous Warhammer Fantasy Battles setting, came in and basically decided, I'm going to take over all of this and you all are going to do what I say. To make matters even more fun, there were actually living creatures, humans, elves, etc., in this land. So the free city that I'm working on is known as the City of Lethis. And in the lore, they are a very superstitious and very, let's just say, active in something that would be equivalent to what we call tarot today. These guys They are a very dour, grim bunch, but their city also has a bunch of shysters in it that used to sell various charms and trinkets that allegedly would ward off the undead. An earlier part of the setting for Warhammer Age of Sigmar had something called the Necroquake, where the god of death Nagash decided he was going to cause everything to turn into the realm of the dead, and thus defeat chaos that way. Well, little did he know a bunch of little rat-like dudes decided to gnaw their way into his home base, threw things out of balance, and when he activated his final solution, it ended up going completely and totally haywire, leading to his grand experiment going completely poof, causing a bunch of magical spells to essentially become alive of their own accord, and raising a bunch of different undead all across the mortal realms that were not under anyone's control. And now everyone's been dealing with that end result. Well, when that activated, this city, they were sitting right on top of a bunch of ghosts decided to wake up, and they found, quite to their amazement, the amulets and trinkets that they were buying, selling, and hawking as what they figured was kind of a scam actually worked. So there were some of the undead who they couldn't actually do much in the way of harm aside from scaring some of these folks half to death. Now, were some of the charms actually scams? Of course, human nature and all. However, if you're a undead hunter in the Age of Sigmar, you basically want to go to Lethis first and see about getting some charms, maybe some ammunition that's been blessed that can actually make your crossbow effective against the undead, or even the undead's construct models. Alright, well, it's been about half an hour. I see no comments in the stream. I see no one coming in to join in, so I'm going to go ahead and discontinue this live stream for now. For those of you that did pop in and join in, thank you. I do appreciate it. You didn't have to do that. And for anyone who catches this in the future, I don't necessarily guarantee that I'll do a lot of these, but every now and again, either when the urge hits me or if I miss a Saturday evening stream for whatever reason, I might try and do one of these paint and chill streams in the future. Usually when I do, there's no topic to it, and it's one of these things where if you're willing to be YouTube friendly, I'm willing to let you come on and just chit chat, because we all occasionally need to get stuff out in the open. But I hope everybody has a nice remainder of your Sunday afternoon. I hope you all have a good week, and on the off chance I don't do a stream between now and New Year's, I hope everyone has a good Christmas holiday season. Or if you don't celebrate Christmas, I hope whatever holiday you do celebrate is nice and enjoyable. Or at the very least, that any time off that you get during this time of year is enjoyable. So, everyone be safe, and I look forward to seeing you in the future.